Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Sam,
And I'm Melissa.
and we want to answer some more questions that you all have had about me growing up in the FLDS Polygamist group.
Yes, and we've been getting a lot of questions actually towards me, which thank you. I feel very flattered that anybody.
It's your turn now to answer some questions.
Yeah, so we've been getting a lot of questions kind of about some of my thoughts and feelings about Sam growing up in polygamy and things like that. So we thought we would answer those questions
Yes.
for you as best I can. I'm used to asking questions, not answering them. So bear with
We'll
me
we'll
on
try to swap
swap roles for
swap
this one.
roles for a minute here and see how it goes. See
Yeah.
if I can do this interviewing stuff.
Yeah.
So, what was it like to him, or what was your first thoughts? Because obviously you grew up in a place in St. George, Utah that was close to where the polygamous group was, where I grew up.
Yes.
So you had heard and seen and knew a little bit about those people. So what was your first impression when you met me?
Okay, so I have two first impressions of Sam. And for the people that have seen our like how we re-met video, I'll give a quick recap. But my very first impression was when he showed up to my 18th birthday party and we decided we were going to be lunch buddies and go to lunch together and we went on two lunch dates and
And that was that.
and that was that for our first meeting. But my first impressions then, you had a big time hick accent, like I'm talking really strong. He was super super nice. Like I stopped going to lunch with him because he was so sweet and would always pay, but it made me feel like we were on dates and I wasn't interested in dating him. But I was like, but he was being a gentleman, but I felt like guilty, like us going to lunch
Yeah.
and you continuing to pay for me. So I was like, oh, and so we just kind of went our separate ways. So first impressions were he was definitely a gentleman, um, was super sweet and always paid for me.
Had a hick accent.
Had a
You
very
said?
strong
Okay.
hick
Yeah.
accent. And I don't remember a ton about our conversations in the beginning, but I obviously knew you were from out there.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't odd because where I grew up, we were 45 minutes outside of where he grew up.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of like, we'd see polygamists at Costco and at Walmart, like in our community all the time. They didn't say much to us, but there were also some boys that I went to high school with
Mm-hmm.
that I think they were considered lost boys that had been kicked out. And so I had some of them in my high school. Again, I wasn't like really close with them. Well, I wasn't really close with any of them. There was one that had a family in my neighborhood had taken in, and he was the closest I'd say I was to. And so I knew like a little bit more of his
Mm-hmm.
story that this family had taken in. And super sweet guy. They're super hard workers. Um, but I didn't have like a really close relationship with anybody from out there, mostly because they were kind of closed off to the rest of us. And then the boys that had been kicked out, you could tell were like working
Yeah.
through having left their community and finding new homes and finding people to take them in and
So
stuff.
obviously your first impressions weren't that important because it's not like you were planning on dating or marrying me at that time.
No.
So it was more of a just a general,
Just a
okay, yeah, he has an accent, he's from out there, whatever. He's
Exactly.
really nice, but no thank you. Have a good life.
Basically,
Yeah.
yeah, at that point.
Yeah, no, I remember that too. So we briefly met. We went. I mean, it was just a couple very short. Went out to lunch
Yeah.
and then we were neither of us were ready to date really seriously at that time anyway. We were
Mm-mm.
kind of doing our own things and all that. But anyway, yeah. So now let's fast forward then because that was that. So then when we re-met,
Yes.
so this was about 5 years later. We re-met. And so this was completely different then at this point because we were both a lot more serious, looking for a
Yeah.
relationship. So
Yeah.
what were your thoughts then? Because this is where it gets important. Like, were you nervous that at some point I might want to get another wife, or what were your thoughts at that point?
Okay, well, first thing I have to say is we were at the age where I think we were like at the age where we would want something serious in the back of our heads, but I wasn't looking for anything serious,
True.
and neither were you at the exact
True.
time. So we always kind of laugh about that a little bit. That like when you stop looking for the right one, that's when they'll just kind of like fall in your lap. Or in this case, when I saw him, I'd like barely even recognized him.
Yeah, I had given up completely on finding the right girl. Literally, just the week before, I had told myself, okay, you know what? I'm not even going to try. I'm just gonna go to school. I'm done even trying to go on dates and all this stuff because I wasn't finding anyone that worked well with me, and it just wasn't working out. So I gave up, and then she came along.
Yeah, and I had just moved back to my hometown, and I was convinced that I had dated everyone or their cousin before in my small hometown, and so I was giving up on love completely. I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna find anybody like if I move back, and I chose to do that anyway. So that I
Lucky
think
me.
adds a adds a fun element to the fact that we weren't really like searching. When I saw
Sure.
him, I barely recognized him and awkwardly like tapped him on the shoulder and was like, "Is your name Sam?" But he had grown up and he was a man now, and he didn't have an accent. Like even when we went on the first date, I literally couldn't remember that he was from out there on our first date, and I like felt like he had been, but now he didn't have an accent at all. Excuse me. He was going to college, which before didn't seem like a path that he wanted to take. And so I was a little bit like, our first date, I was confused.
Mm-hmm.
And the night after our first date, I actually had a dream, and the dream was our first lunch dates. And it's what like sparked my
Wow.
memory of the fact that he was from out there and that was like where he came from and stuff. And so
Wow.
then it was until our next date a couple days later that I like just had to kind of come forward and ask him and be like, "Are you from out in Colorado City? Like, are you from that polygamist group?" Do you remember me asking you that?
Yes, I do. Yeah, you
Okay.
said I thought you were, but maybe I'm wrong. And yeah, I mean it had been 5 years and a lot had changed. So,
Yeah.
but so something you brought up, the education. So that was going to be one of my questions. Is that something that you were concerned or thought about? Because had you heard that people out there didn't really have an education?
Yeah, yeah. So that was definitely so meeting him the first time. I think to be honest, that was something that, you know, I I don't want to say I didn't want to date you, but like in the sense
I
of
mean, it's important.
that wasn't
Yeah.
something, yeah, education was something that's super important to me, and it
Mhm.
didn't seem like it was something important to him at the time.
And it
So
wasn't. You're right.
yeah.
It wasn't anything that I had no intention of going and getting a higher education of any kind at that point.
Yeah.
I was just trying to find a job and survive.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So
yeah.
that was something that was a huge difference that when I
Mhm.
re-met him, I was like, oh, he's going to school. It was all these different things that made me realize how, I guess, distance I felt you were from the way you grew up.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people ask me like, oh, okay, were you worried about him like wanting to go back out there? But I think I didn't really, honestly, I guess the short answer is no. I was never worried about him wanting to go back out there. I was never really worried about you wanting to have more wives or anything, but I think it was because at this point I had like seen what a difference in path he was than when he first left. And also like you were just so far separated from that whole community that it didn't seem
Yeah.
like it wasn't really even in my mindset when we were dating. It felt like was dating somebody that would have been raised on the outside their whole life.
So here's a question that some have had
Yeah.
to continue on with this. What about, because for some people they really want their children to grow up with grandparents around and all that. So was that a concern when we started dating that you knew that we weren't really going to be able to have that relationship with my parents?
No. So I always joke with people that like his family is complicated, but mine is crazy. And
Yeah.
so I grew up having, you know, with two grandmas, like a grandma and a step grandma, and only one grandpa. And my other grandpa I never met. My mom's never met her dad. So I had already grown up in like family dynamics that extended family and grandpas. Like it didn't have to look like this perfect family tree. Like my family tree isn't like this perfect tree. And so in my mind, the idea of like how many grandparents our kids had, or if they had bonus grandparents, or anything like that, didn't really ever.
Right.
It wasn't really
Well,
ever concern.
at that point too, the family that took me in when I moved out had become a family to me as well, and you know they still are my family.
Yeah,
So-
and
so-
they're the grandparents to our children. So that's
Yeah.
why I say like we have bonus grandparents. Like our kids know 3 sets of grandparents, you know, and unfortunately Sam's biological family, they only see pictures of, but they know that that's, we
Yeah.
call them grandmother and grandfather, you know, that's their grandmother, that's their grandfather, and, you know, so
Yeah.
they just, to me, they got extra and bonus, and
There's a lot of pieces and parts to it that makes it a little complicated, but everyone has some complications in their family,
Exactly.
just in different ways. But Okay, so you weren't really concerned about that necessarily. Interesting.
Nope, I wasn't.
Okay.
So I would say too, like the polygamy part, because I got that question asked, and my mom actually told me that she had people ask her, like if she was worried about
Mm-hmm.
you wanting to have more wives or anything,
I
and
mean, it's a valid concern. That's the way I was raised.
yeah, and
Yeah.
again, we dated and got engaged and got married very quick. I was so like head over heels and still am in love that um I didn't even, honestly, those weren't even concerns. Like, I felt like I knew his heart, and that's what I was like excited, and I knew your character.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I knew what he wanted for the future, and so I wasn't really concerned about the polygamy thing. My mom met Sam, like, my parents met Sam right away, and neither of them were concerned about it either.
Yeah. And I don't think you ever asked me, but I think I just told you. I said, hey, just so you know, like, you're gonna be all I want. I think I remember just talking to you about that, not because you were asking me, but just because I wanted you to know. Because obviously, I mean, it's understandable that it could be a concern, but it never was, and it's not. I never I never ever had the intention of either going back or getting at that point anyway when we re-met or ever going back or getting remarried or getting married to more than one person. I just never came across my mind actually. So.
No, and he was always very much. I mean, we very committed to me, so I never really had any of those worries. So
Yep.
I wish there was something more exciting to tell than that for you, or I'm kind of glad there isn't. But
some big drama or fights that no, nothing
no,
like that.
it was straightforward.
It was pretty simple actually. We just knew when we re-met and it was pretty quick.
Yeah, and I'd say too, for like, there were definitely cultural things that I continued to learn, and things that even now sometimes there'll be like something funny. Like, since we've had our babies,
Mm-hmm.
we do this little piggy went to market, this little piggy went home, like on baby's
On the
toes.
toes, yeah.
Yeah, like things like that. Like, we do those differently, and I'm like, what? You can't do it that way, you know. But I feel like those are
Yeah.
cultural things that are gonna happen in any marriage, in any family,
Right.
and so most of the things that are like cultural, like you grew up with, we always just joke that he just kind of grew up in the 1800s, and so I just married a pioneer, basically.
Yep. No, yeah. I mean, it's a lot of things. It's funny because I will joke with Melissa's mom about things that I grew up, and when she grew up, we had similar.
Oh yeah, like
type,
technology and stuff.
Technology and the type of phones we used and the color scheme in our homes and that kind of stuff was all it was just set back in the day, yeah.
Yeah.
But they did have technology out there. I grew up with nice vehicles and that type of thing, but
Yeah.
for whatever reason, some of the things took longer to catch up though.
Yeah. So, but like I said, I feel like a lot of those things are just funny things that you'd have with combining lives with anybody. So, nope. And overall, I didn't have any concerns as far as that went. It was more curiosity. Oh, and I will say that one thing that helped is Sam's always been super open and honest about where he came from. And I think that really helped a ton when we were dating.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Because if I ever had a question, even like I said, it was only our second date when I was like, now you're from out there, right? And he was like, oh yeah, da 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 da, and started talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like because I never had to like censor myself, like I could ask him any questions I wanted whenever I wanted about anything out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that opened up like a whole level of comfort. You know, normally if I was worried you're gonna want extra wives, you would have been secretive about it. You know what I mean? Like, or you I don't know.
Yeah, I'm so comfortable and open about everything. I'm not ashamed of where I grew up. I mean, it's just it's life, and so I'm very open about it. Obviously, that's why we're here talking about it. So yes, I can see that would have been a big concern for you if I would have acted uncomfortable about certain things or not wanted to talk about certain things. That way you wouldn't be sure what I felt about it. So
yeah, but since you were always, I think that's the main thing, is he's just been always super open and super transparent with me about everything, and including how he feels about those things, and so that made it so that I always had clarity of what you were thinking and feeling. So yeah.
Well, that's a little bit about that, I guess.
Yeah, about how I felt getting married to someone who had grown up in a polygamist family. So
hey, at least we have interesting stories to tell now, right?
Exactly. But if you want to hear more about Sam growing up in polygamy, or if you guys have more questions, even directed towards me or just
This
anything
was
in
fun to
general.
switch it around a little bit.
Yeah, it was kind of fun getting to talk.
Yeah.
So, anyway, if you guys have any more questions, please leave them in the comments, like and subscribe, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
We'll talk to you soon.